Good afternoon and welcome to this special edition of In-Depth School and Community, a monthly show that features topical issues confronting greater school and community here in Norwich and Hanover. With me today, I've got three very important, very interesting guests. As you may know, last year we did a show on wellness. It was one of our initiatives here in SAU 70, and it was quite successful. In fact, so much so that we thought we'd do it again. So we're starting off this new year. We're centering it around New Year's resolution as a kickoff campaign, and so all of us are very eager to see how this is going to play out. And so I have with me three interesting guests, and I'll introduce them now. Mr. Bill Hammond, who's principal of Maricross School. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Frank.
Dr. Christine Medora, who is a physician in town who has children in the Norwich school system.
Yep, thank you.
And Mr. Mike Lapine, who is the principal of Richmond Middle School.
Good afternoon.
You'll note, if you watch carefully on your camera, you'll see that both Mike and I are wearing Fitbits. This is also part of the challenge. Bill is in the process of getting one, I'm sure, and Christine doesn't need one because she's a physician. So.
Yeah, not true.
Anyway, let's get down to the brass tacks if we could. Why are we doing this program? We'll start with Bill. Bill, you sort of came into this on the backside, if you will. So tell us your interest and involvement in the program.
I think anytime you can work on something that shows that as a leader that you're interested in helping us all be in good shape, not only physically but mentally, it's a great thing for a leader to do. So I'm happy to do that. Plus, I like to stay active anyway myself, so it's not much of a compromise to try this out.
No, thank you. Now, Christine, last year you were on the show with us, and we talked about the results and how there are so many other factors that come into play other than just exercise and how much you eat in a given day. And so, with your help, and certainly with the help of others who participate in the program, we got our insurance rates back this year. Now, as I'm sure the folks know, usually they come back at 5, 6, 7, or even as high as 8 or 10% in terms of an increase in our insurance rates for medical. This year, they actually went down by 2%. Now, I'm sure it's not all about the wellness initiative, but I'd like to think that we had something to do with that.
Absolutely. I think a lot of corporations, as I'm sure you know, have wellness programs that they implement, and a lot of that is, of course, to improve the health of the community and the health of their employees. A big part of it is, of course, to reduce insurance premiums, and it's clearly shown that exercise and improved lifestyle, healthy eating, decrease the risk of chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, mental health disease, all kinds of stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But it makes sense for an insurer to decrease your rates because of implementing a program like this and getting people involved. So I think it's a great thing all around.
Yeah, certainly our incidence of needing physicians or hospital care has gone down. I think back to Bill's point, it puts a bounce in your step. It changes your mental attitude about what you're doing, and it gives you a little bit more energy, and so maybe you're actually more productive than you were prior to the program. But Mike, as we mentioned at the beginning of the program, you're wearing a Fitbit. Talk to us about why you're wearing the Fitbit and what does it do for you?
Sure. Well, I think it's a part of what Bill was talking about. When you're a leader in an organization, not only are you out front trying to do the things that you're asking other people to do, but you're also looking for opportunities to bring the group together and those kind of collaborative, fun experiences that build those relationships in the community that you have. And so for me, this is a good example. There are a number of people in our building who, like me, might be a tad bit competitive or enjoy that sort of data piece, and are part of a community where we sort of keep track of each other. Other administrators around the district, some other teachers, some other parents even, are sort of Fitbit buddies, and we have the weekly competitions with steps or activity. So it's just another way to be engaged. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's probably not that accurate, but it's fun, and I think that's a big part.
What does the Fitbit actually do for you, for our folks at home?
So for me, it gives me a day-to-day comparison on how active I've been. So right now we're sitting static.
Right.
So my steps aren't going up, and my activity level is pretty low, and I just ate lunch. So what I try to use it for also professionally is a measure of what I'm doing, how I'm spending my day.
Mm-hmm.
If my numbers are low, I've been at the computer way too long, or I've been in too many meetings. I'm not out and about involved in the school, checking in with people or having conversations, being a part of classes. If my numbers are high at the end of the day, I have another measure of how successful I've been in being engaged in the community.
So it's a day-to-day gauge.
Yeah, that's
Right.
it. It's compare to compare.
Yeah.
I don't put a lot of stock in how many miles or any of that
Right.
because it's not that accurate. But But for me, it is an interesting comparison of how active.
Does it keep track of how many times you wave at people?
You know, I've tried to cheat that way. It's surprisingly good at noticing the difference between you know, doing that and actually walking around. But yeah, you can game it for sure.
Now, Bill, I mean, we talked about doing this program and said, well, I hope you're not going to ask me to lose weight. And Mike doesn't need to lose weight either. So I guess the question is, and for the folks at home, so why are you guys doing this wellness program? You guys don't need to lose weight, so what's the big deal?
Health for us might not be about losing weight. It might be about making sure that we have a balanced life in terms of stress versus calm moments in our life. It may be about flexibility too. That's a great opportunity with yoga or something like that to work on keeping things stretched, oxygenating the blood. All that
Sure.
contributes to
Sure.
health.
Bill mentioned balance, Christine. Can you talk to us about the importance of this sort of overall balance in terms of how we look at a health program like this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Physical fitness, when you think about what that actually means, it's kind of a measure of a lot of different things. We think of it as cardiovascular fitness, but it's also a measure of strength, flexibility, endurance, and so it kind of looks at a lot of general goals that indicate somebody's level of physical fitness. Meaning, you know, can we go about our tasks of daily living and do it in a way where we have a vitality, enjoyment of it, with sort of limiting the physiologic stress and fatigue. And so when you think about someone being physically fit, we all kind of know that concept of someone who, if you had to go, you know, run, if there was an emergency and you had to run from here to the Hanover fire station, are you going to be able to do it?
Right.
Can you get there? Are you going to have to stop? Are you going to be short of breath? And that's kind of what we think about as physical fitness, is how can you go about your day comfortably and with a lot of energy and vigor, or is it a stress to do some normal physical activities of daily living? And I know last year I remember talking about the difference between physical activity and exercise.
Right.
And physical activity, I kind of get a kick out of the definition, is basically anything above baseline activity level. So it's anything that gets you moving beyond sitting in a chair.
So here's baseline right here.
Right, this
There
is
you
it.
go.
So physical activity is anything, you know, cleaning the house, walking around, getting up and moving versus sitting. Whereas exercise is something that's planned, it's repetitive, it's structured, and it's done with the purpose of increasing physical fitness.
Well, let's tease that out a little bit. So all three of us obviously have very busy days, and we're actively moving around our buildings in sometimes in haphazard ways.
You
And
said
so-
all three of us. Which three are you choosing?
I think you mean
Sorry, Bill. I'm the one who's taken out of this.
I think you mean you guys.
I mean,
That's why you need one of these.
Oh. Yeah, but Christina
This
is
will
I'm
I
just
don't
so
know.
administrative.
All right.
So, because we have such active lives, and I think this is another question for a lot of folks at home. Oh, you know, I just can't get to the gym 3 times a week, and I can't get my heart rate up to 140 beats per minute over a 15 or 20 minute period. So I'm missing out on all this great exercise to lower my blood pressure and lower my resting pulse. But that's not really true. Doing what we do, and people can certainly emulate this by, as you say, activity, actually works towards that end. Yes.
It does, absolutely. So there's no doubt that, you know, physical activity helps to decrease all what's called all-cause mortality. You know, that we look at people who, being sedentary in and of itself, sitting all day, has an increased risk of mortality and cardiovascular disease and other things all by itself. Even when you add in certain amounts of activity or take away other risk factors, when you just compare people in how long they sit every day, the risk of many chronic illnesses goes up just by prolonged sitting.
Right.
So being physically active, anything, walking from one classroom to another, you know, running around the school building, going from meeting to meeting, or seeing patients all day and not sitting in a chair is all good.
Yeah.
And the hardest part are, like my husband, who's a computer programmer, people who have to sit all day have a harder time being active, and that's why the whole stand-up desk, like lots of other things, have come in to try to combat that. So all physical activity is good activity. Ideally, you also want to get people to exercise. So you want to aim for, you know, people getting at least like 150 minutes a week of moderate physical activity or 75 minutes a week of vigorous physical activity.
Mhm.
Moderate being things like playing golf, walking, cleaning the house.
Yeah.
Vigorous being the stuff we think of as exercise,
Right.
calisthenics, going to the gym,
Sure.
running. So exercise is good. All physical activity is good.
Uh-huh.
Adding exercise to it is even better.
Got it.
And what we do, I mean,
Yes.
Michael, for example, will play basketball with the students.
Yeah.
He may be
Yes.
here,
Yeah.
but that's part of his work. It's not
Right.
just to play basketball. It's certainly to make relationships with the kids, but he can stay active that way.
Good point.
This morning we had Michael Holland
Yeah.
working with the third graders on ski jumping
Uh-huh. Right.
over at Marion Cross School.
Mhm.
And I just happened to step in every once in a while to do some of the activities that he was working with the students with. And it wasn't just about the jumping.
Right.
It was also about balance. It was
Uh-huh.
about agility. So he had some ladders on the ground,
Sure.
and we had to step through them
Right.
the way the football players go
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
through tires or something like that.
Yeah.
That all that is part of the activity too. And so I was able to stay a little more active than usual this morning by modeling for the students and just being with the students and doing the activities that they're doing.
Right, but I think in both cases, you and Mike, you're finding the means to be able to incorporate those kinds of activities. And as you said, not only is it good for you in terms of physical activity, but it's also good for you in terms of your job, in that you're making connections with kids. You're in a position where you're interacting at a different level other than I'm the principal and you're the student, which is another important consideration.
I think it's also an aspect of leading a healthy organization to try to think of all the different roles and responsibilities that different people in your building have, and how are we creating opportunities for them to do the same thing. If I'm a sixth grade teacher and I spend most of my day in my classroom and I have duties during any time that I'm not, it can be really hard to think of ways to stay physically active.
Sure.
So how can we provide opportunities, lead by example, create coverage scenarios by which they can have a walking meeting instead of sitting around a conference table, by which they can join the kids like Mr. Hall was today, doing dancing during lunch in the cafeteria.
Right.
You know, so that they are able to do those things too. So part of leadership and keeping your staff healthy, modeling for the students, is thinking about those other roles within the building and helping to facilitate those.
Yeah, good point. Let's shift. We spent a lot of time on activity and physical fitness end of it. Let's talk about hydration and food. So we'll start with you, Christine. Talk to us about the need for hydration. Now, some books will say, oh, you should have 6 to 8 glasses of water a day. Others will say, well, whatever your fluid intake is, as long as you're getting, again, 6 to 8, that's a pretty good baseline.
I think that hydration, it is very personal. It's very person dependent.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think most of us have heard the 8-ounce glasses of water a day. And that may be right for some people, but there's also some evidence that may be a little bit more than you need.
Mhm.
And depending on the individual, if you're in a classroom or no matter what you're doing, you know, you have to balance that with the need to constantly go to the restroom, depending on who you are and what phase of life you're in. So, you know, I think the thing is, most of us, though, I think what you're driving at is that most of us probably don't drink enough. I know that when we're busy, if you don't have access to water and you don't have access to beverages, you just aren't going to drink. And so a lot of people really do underhydrate during the workday. And so hydration is important. It's important being just for general fitness, for general health, and also prevention of things like kidney stones and lots of stuff. So it's good to hydrate during the day. It's certainly good to eat healthy. I mean, still aiming always for 5 servings of fruits and vegetables. And when I talk to my patients, I mean, really most of us don't get that. You really have to think about it to actually
Right.
get 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, depending on, of course, how people eat at baseline.
Mhm.
So really trying to